Thank you.
Got perfect timing.
Yeah, exactly, yes.
Yes, Tyler. Yes.
Yes, our official good morning.
Yes, our official.
Sir.
Christopher Irwin.
Christopher?
Yes, sir. Good. How are you?
Already said good morning
Yes,
to you.
already saw you, already saw you, yes.
Good morning.
And good morning. How are
Christopher.
you?
Nice to
Sir.
meet you. Bruce, how are you?
Good, how are you doing?
Doing
I
good.
seen you near South by or something, right?
Yeah,
probably.
I've seen you around a little bit here and there, so good to see you, sir.
You too.
Sir? I'm here.
Morning, sir.
How are you doing?
Good, how are you? Christopher Irwin.
And who are
Nice to
you?
meet you.
Yeah, who are you?
Sir?
Hi, Jessica Garner.
Jessica, I'm Larry.
Nice to meet
Tyler
you.
Latham. Nice to meet
I
you.
usually like to be the oldest man in the room, but today I usually like to be the oldest man in the room.
Oh, I just want to know if you guys will admit who wins that test.
He's a
Good morning. If I may, I'd just like to start out and then hear from y'all. I want to welcome y'all here. Thank you for being back to the table to see if we can get together and negotiate a long-term agreement with the Austin Police Association. We believe that's clearly in the best interest of your members, my constituent city council members, the city manager, the mayor, and the members of this community. The framework for this bargaining is a little different, of course, because under Proposition A passed by the voters and adopted by city council ordinance, we have parameters that have been added to the bargaining process, and we're here to make an agreement that is consistent with and fulfills those requirements in accordance with those provisions. I know that Mayor Watson has made a number of public statements about that. I know he's had conversations directly with members of your team, if not all of you. That is the bottom line and the framework for us being able to make an agreement. And so that is our direction as we go forward. Constructively, both of us have put together some proposed ideas for ground rules, and I'm ready to go over those with you and exchange proposals in advance. Our ground rules discussions will cover some of the procedural differences in the process this time. And so that's really the framework and our introductory remarks. We've done a great deal of work. I assume that y'all have done the same from the draft that we've received and are beginning to go through and study. So I'll turn it over, Ron, to you or to Jessica, whoever's going to speak first, just to hear your opening remarks and what you see as the best way to get this done.
Thank you, Lowell. Well, I think there's been quite a bit back and forth in the newspaper about the intent of both parties to try to get a collective bargaining agreement. It's been a while. It expired. We think it's in everyone's best interest that we have a deal that attracts new applicants and retains the officers that we have, and encourages some not to leave at the first date at which they can leave, stay a little longer until the city can kind of get over the, which is basically a local and a national hiring crisis. We've come committed to reach that. I think we'll explain as we lay out our proposals where we think the path is to get there. both sides have just received each other's proposals, a lot of it's the same. I haven't done a side-by-side yet, so there may be little things that, once you explain them, I have a chance to go back and take a look at them. But we're here to get a deal. And I guess that's where we're at.
Any further remarks? I think I turned that on, there we go. So I think what I'd like to do first is just go over the ground rules, which you have, and generally discuss the changes that exist here and focus on those. We have reduced the size of the teams after just some preliminary chats with each other about what we expect in terms of who's going to be here. We have reduced the numbers, and I don't think that's going to have a direct bearing one way or the other, may actually expedite some of our discussions. We will have present here probably each time the team that you see. On occasion, probably more often than not, Becky Hayward here will be the lead spokesperson on our side. I have a serious police case that I'm trying in April in San Antonio. I'll be here whenever I can. So the ground rules talk about if ABL is available, there's an expiration date at the end of the month in the carryover contract provision. I think we just deal with that when we come to it. You know, maybe we will be successful in shorter order than getting into the April timeframe that I just mentioned. Under these proposed negotiating rules that you have, the rest of those are probably the same as we have done for more than one cycle in the past. I don't believe there's any changes in number 5 and its subparts. Same would be true for number 6. I don't think that there's any changes in the scheduling proposal, so let us know. I think those have worked effectively in the past. I think the primary things that we need to sort through today and make sure we're on the same page. I believe that our information and data sharing will stay largely as it has been in the past, but I'd encourage you to think through those actual logistics and how we're going to do that so that we can be coming to the meetings and prepared to go forward. I think we've done that effectively before. Our revisions are primarily in the context of a couple of things that y'all told us in terms of coming back to the bargaining table. And hopefully I can characterize these correctly. You can address that, but we have a couple of conditions that y'all shared with us in terms of coming back to the bargaining table. Historically, we have always insisted as firmly as we knew how that we have a bargaining session at the bargaining table and that you would agree not to interact with elected officials in the course of the process. And it's our understanding that you felt like that was not a fair condition and that your hands were tied. And so we are certainly willing to make the changes that we have here. We have added this provision that this prohibition does not preclude the association from communicating to its members or the city, communicating to the city council and so forth. We are open to communication with the city council on behalf of the APA during this process, if y'all believe that's essential to going forward. One of the concerns that we have, and this is not really a ground rule proposal, but there's an awful lot of ways that people communicate these days other than face-to-face. And we think it's really important for us, to the extent that we can make common cause here, not to have unilateral press releases and other public statements, and that includes all of the different social media items, you know, like Twitter, social media, X, so forth and so on. Our objective is to have a constructive process to where all of the people that have to ultimately be in favor of the agreement that we reach can stay on the same side. There are difficult issues for your membership, difficult issues for the constituency that we bring to the table. And so we just want it to be not to be any more divisive than it needs to be. And I'm open to hearing how we can accomplish that. We realize that's a two-way street, and so I'd invite your feedback on that. But we really think that that's an important part of doing this the way it needs to be done. The other condition that we understand from y'all is that for some period of time, we have used draft exchanges that under applicable law are not actually public records, and we have used them in the public, and we have displayed them in the public, and we have talked about them in the public while they are projected on media, both in the sessions and in broadcast media, taking them out of the statutory classification. Y'all indicated to us that you wanted to strictly follow the statute and have drafts that retained their non-public information status during the bargaining process until we get to the end and we actually have an agreement for people to consider. We have come to the table willing to do that. That's not our preference to do it, but we understand that that's something that's important to y'all. It is important to make a deal. We wanted to come to the table, and so those are the criteria that we're going forward with. We will probably ask you to revisit that after we set the tenor and the tone of this process, but in any event, we have agreed to that provision and just want that to be clear. So I think we have captured the correct language there, and if you have further feedback on how we should do that, then we're open to further discussion. So what I would do, I'll turn this over to y'all and hear your feedback on that. I'd like to have as much discussion about how we can structure this process to make it work as y'all are prepared for at this time. And hopefully we can get these out of the way, because I don't think there's anything in here that's very controversial. Ron?
I'll address the communication with council portion that you mentioned first. I just want to emphasize how important the open lines of communication between the APA, the city, and city council has been to actually bring us back to this point. And so it's our opinion and position that to create a restriction on a type of communication that allowed us to even get back in front of one another into this conversation would be basically counter to the momentum we have moving forward. We completely agree that the communication does not need to be divisive in nature, and that is not our intent. I think that it is very important to recognize the collaborative nature that our new leadership has taken at the APA. We are open to conversation about anything and everything, no matter how difficult that conversation may be. And I think we are setting the tone of a very respectful process. And I will give you my word, my commitment as the chair of the APA bargaining committee, that is the tone that will remain, because we want this to be as productive as everyone else in this room does.
Well, I think Jessica laid it out. I would ask you in Ground Rules 13, just to make reference that the state law you're talking about is in both 142 and in 143. Just put the citations. I don't know if it's in 552, which is the Open Records Act, or not. You don't have to write it out. But basically, we've requested that we just follow the state law at this time. And so I understand your position. I don't have any other heartburn. I think we've bargained enough contracts to know that Our goal here is to get a deal at the table. We can't control in a modern media-driven world, as we see in all of our politics, people on all sides of the question. But we can control what we do here. I think Jessica's correct. We'd like to have a respectful conversation. There are things that we're not going to agree on. The things that maybe we'll agree on after we have a chance to reflect or counter. We just don't know yet. So by the next meeting, we'll have done side by sides, have a better grip on all of it. But I think if today we can walk through it, there is some steep hills here, and we all know what they will be, and we're prepared to discuss them. And I think we've a good start if we both exchanged those proposals we wanted on the tables today and gave everybody at least some opportunity to look at them.
So what is your thinking about the best way to proceed? Do you want to give us any further direction on these ground rules, or should we take them, consider I think all you've asked for specifically in terms of modification is reference to those other two statutory provisions that deal with the public information status of the draft proposals and so forth. So,
That's correct. I think you fix that, we'll be prepared to sign
We'll
it.
do that in between and have that
Yeah.
ready to sign.
Okay.
And then as far as the process to get underway in terms of the proposals and agreements, what would be your pleasure and what's your recommendation about how we could proceed most expediently? Do you want to identify some articles to pick out and talk about, or do you just want to go through start to finish?
I'd prefer we just start, and just as a public reference, this is a new contract. Although we recognize that we've had prior contracts, including what we just call the TA, the contract that did not get ratified by the council. So a lot of the work that was done in the previous agreements does not need to be redone. I mean, we've worked out promotions and things where there may just be some tuning. So what I would prefer, since we have pretty similar things on the table, is let's just start at Article 1. There may not require much to be said. And there's a few where we want to explain what our thinking was, and we want to understand clearly what the city's reasoning for making changes or adding new language. So I would like to just start there, and you can do one, or I can do one, then we'll do yours, however you wish to do it.
You bet. Why don't you go ahead and go forward? I'll follow yours and then respond.
I will. I was looking at Mr. Parks over there, waiting to see if I pick up this microphone. I wish that I didn't have to do it, but that's the all right. Article 1 is the preamble. And unless I'm missing something, I don't see any differences between our proposal and yours. It just lays out the statute and the dates that the contract's ratified.
I agree with that. My computer was playing a little game with me and wouldn't let me log in.
Well, we have our sources. All right, I'll just lay out ours. Article 2 is definitions. We made a slight change in authorized association representative. We previously just had a broader deal that said a representative selected by the executive board of the association. But basically, we changed it to authorized association representative means the president of the association or their designee. The president will attend as a representative or will designate someone. We don't need to have to go back get the whole executive board gathered up, just appoint someone to go to a meeting. So that's all we changed previously. Let's see. That's it.
We have given you a revised introduction into the definitions section, which is just really for clarification.
You're gonna have to pick up the microphone.
Yes, sure enough, thank you. So we've revised the introduction there, mostly dealing with the issue of preemption. And we think it's an improvement over some prior versions. For the most part, these definitions that we are suggesting remains the same. If you'll look at the changes that we have sent in your draft, I don't think that there's probably anything else that's a problem. I will mention that when we get to the key articles that reflect the Proposition A elements, that we have definitions there that we have not included in this article. And we can discuss those when we get to the relevant portions of the agreement. But I think there's very little there to change, and probably much of it that's really not controversial. If you have any questions about what we have proposed in that article, or the meaning of the change in the introduction paragraph, I can respond to that further when we come back from our caucus.
I think I understand what you want.
Okay, so moving on to Article 3, recognition. I think y'all's draft pared this down a little bit. We have a provision in here that kind of expands upon the TA, where we specifically referenced a policy review committee. We've just made it broader to allow the association and the chief to kind of collaborate on when an association representative would be appropriate on a committee, and making sure that our membership has that representation when necessary and appropriate. It's not binding for any specific committees, it is just a collaborative approach to that. We've added a section for notices. You'll see it's a lengthy notice section, I recognize that. We have very few people at the APA, and while we don't have as many officers as we should or need, we do still have 1,400 plus people we are trying to keep track of, and we would just like to kind of create a more streamlined system for receiving information. We're definitely open to talking about how that actually looks logistically, but the general idea and purpose is to make sure that we're supporting the department by supporting our people, and that we know kind of what's going on and when it's happening, and nobody falls through the cracks. And that really sums up our additions or changes to Article 3.
I will probably want to ask some more questions about that. I have some preliminary questions, and Sarah or Becky may have some further. This kind of proposal always raises 2 or 3 questions in my mind. And I always try to control the impulse that proposals for more collaboration with management on these topics tends to interfere in the ability of management to manage the department. There's obviously a legitimacy to the topics here. Many times, the association's involvement in things may actually be conducive to less conflict, reaction, bad outcomes, hurt feelings, whatever it is. The flip side of that is on the procedural side. What happens if the notices don't go out? You haven't put particular time periods in there. So I have a sense that you're actually looking to foster or enhance communication instead of set up gotchas, but the gotchas are still a concern. and what happens, what does a grievance look like if, we miss some of these, and, is the consequence that whatever management had the prerogative to do, they lose that prerogative, or somebody changes it. We really need to have a clear understanding of how both of us expect this to work, so that the chief can tell us as we talk about these things, whether or not they can live with that, or whether or not they have concerns about being able to function with more things that tie down or slow down their process.
Understand and recognize all that, and we can definitely continue the conversation to make sure that our purpose and the intended result are in line.
I just have a quick comment.
Just one quick comment, even if we come to an agreement on this sort of a concept, to me, this Article 3 recognition is mirroring 143, and you are the association that we recognize as the bargaining representative, and that this is just a little bit of a misplacement of this concept.
Yeah, I have no strong ties to
didn't
its
think you
location,
did, yeah. Okay,
just
okay.
the content, so,
Yeah.
happy to discuss a different placement
Yeah, I
or
think we
whatever
need to
we
take a look at
figure
that
out.
and look at kind of the details of it and probably flesh that out more with further questions then.
Okay.
And I'm not pushing you to make immediate concessions on your own proposal, but I'm curious about, sometimes we do these kind of things and we put them into a non-grievable status, since they're intended to be, like you said, a collaborative workout, as opposed to something that creates more labor litigation internally to the contract. And so think about that, if it's appropriate for you to give us any feedback about whether or not that's consistent with your concept now, or you can tell us about that later. But that's one of the things that we'll be looking at, whether or not we can say yes to something. And I'm not saying that we could say yes to it and then not follow it and you wouldn't have any remedy. But we have written arbitration clauses in the past where grievances are written to cover management's failure to make appropriate efforts to implement these kinds of things, as opposed to the gotchas that I referred to earlier. And I think we know where we're trying to balance the situation here.
Yeah, we're on the same page with that, and we will talk about it as a team.
Next is Article 4, which is management rights. The Section 1 retain rights in general, I think, is pretty much verbatim. I didn't see anything different. There was a Section 2 that says retain right of independent investigation. The city has the one sentence, the chief of police and city manager fully retain their rights to independently investigate police conduct. We've added some qualifying language that we think is important. For the purposes of this agreement, independent investigation means an administrative investigation or inquiry of alleged or potential misconduct by an officer authorized by the chief of police or city manager and conducted by a person who is not an employee of the city of Austin, an employee of the Office of Police Oversight or successor offices of a different name, but with a substantially similar mission or purpose, or a volunteer member of any public safety-oriented panel or committee. So we're all right if the manager and the police chief feel they need to go outside to have an investigation, but we think it kind of defeats the purpose of independent if the people are working for the city, employees of an oversight body, or volunteers of any other public safety committee. So that's just our qualifiers.
And this language should look familiar from previous contract discussions.
All right, we will talk about how that fits into the broader context of investigative processes, and how it compares to what we have proposed in our, I'm trying to remember the numbers, new Articles 16 and 17, I believe it is. There's a great deal of renumbering on our version of the agreement. So we will discuss that request in the new framework and respond to it. We have a proposal for deletion of some old language on public release of information because we deal with the G-file subject and the other topics in those two articles, 16 and 17. And you have that in our draft.
Yes, we both sides deleted it. It's addressed in other sections. All right. If you'll go to Article 5, non-discrimination. I don't think there's any differences between the two. If you have any,
We have a number of tweaks, I would call them, for the most part. They are capitalization, gender identity, in our proposed changes that you have. Substantively, the article, I think, is essentially as it's been in the past. So,
There's some minor changes that we've seen before, so we'll take a look at.
okay.
wouldn't, you don't have to go through every he, she, they. I thought we'd fix most of those things last time in the contract and make it gender neutral, but
We agree.
But,
We agree. I think we both say that one's pretty close. I'd be surprised, talking about Article 5, right?
yeah. I mean, I think last time we fixed it throughout the whole contract. We're not trying to change any of that.
Right.
All right, well, I'll look, but I didn't see anything of substance, so.
Article 6.
On Article 6, you'll see in our draft that we've just struck a reference to the Combined Law Enforcement Association of Texas. Shouldn't have a material change for y'all. And again, not a material change to the city, but just for transparency with our members, we've increased the deductions for death of officer to $40 from the previous 25, I believe. We've also made it so that in the event that we ever experience the horrors that our police department has in recent months, where we have multiple officer deaths in single pay periods, where we'll spread those deductions out over more than one pay period for our officers' budgeting purposes. But again, only really a change for our membership, not necessarily the city.
So let me ask a couple of questions on that. It's very similar to what we have proposed, almost the same, with a couple of exceptions. In section 1B, we had specifically been asked by our city controller of payroll that we do that out to the third pay period after the officer submits it. I see that you've changed it to the second pay period here. Is there any specific reason? Because that was very problematic for our payroll people.
So just candidly, as we reduce our numbers in membership, as we add members, it's important for us to be able to start collecting dues within a reasonable time frame. And let's see, 3 pay periods, it's gonna be 6 weeks. So 2 pay periods felt more reasonable for us to be able to start collecting dues for new members or people that rejoin the APA.
Okay, so I believe this article deals with the changes in the 10 slots. I could be wrong, but let's both take a look at that, as opposed to the original dues deductions. I could
Section
be wrong.
1B.
But let's both look at that on our caucuses. Yeah, 1B.
Section 1B.
Yeah, we can take a look at that. The other question I had, and I think you may have just explained it, no, you didn't. So I noticed that you changed, if we go out of contract, that you've extended it to 24 months instead of 12 months. Was there a reason for that?
Of course.
Of course. One that we would-
And we'll come to this later. But, basically, Austin, one of the few contracts where they have an evergreen clause, which is a period of, the contract remains in place after it's expired. But you have about 5 mini evergreens in here, which I like. But when you get to, we haven't put term of agreement on the table, but we put a 1-year evergreen in as opposed to the previously was, it expired and you can do 30-day increments up until March 31st after. That's a short period, and we're seeing more and more places, the issues are more complicated, negotiations run longer. So what we're going to propose, and when you get all of our 20, Article 20, which is term of contract, that we'll have a 1-year evergreen. And in these mini evergreens, instead of them being 1 year from the March, they'll be 24 months from the expiration. So they won't run out. They'll run out. And that'll give all of these things. One is promotions, discipline, union dues, release, and there's another one. But all of those were so that when the thing ends, as you know, people are in the pipeline with an old promotional system, and then people are in the middle of a disciplinary hearing, and now you go back to 143 when you already were doing. So these all expire, but it gives us a longer time period to renegotiate a deal. You'll see that when I put that, but that all of the mini will go from 1 year to 2 years.
Got it.
Oh, and just one other thing, so we don't get this, the striking at the end of section 2 was just not needed, the language. It said APA sole exclusive bargaining agent of officers in the department, including APA, well, that's not needed. APA is, it doesn't change anybody's check off or anything. It was just added language that we just got rid of. All right. Neither side put 7 on the table, but we're okay if you want to go ahead and give us your money off, or we're listening. But okay, we understand. All right. And then neither put 8, which is overtime. Those are economic issues that we didn't, both parties. We did not put, we put Article 9 on the table, you did not. So we're going to go ahead and just lay ours out, and then we'll wait on yours.
So one of the changes to Article 9, you'll see reflected in Section 5, military leave. We've increased the number of hours for paid military leave. Obviously, as we try to recruit and retain, paid military leave is an important part of that process. Section 6, productive leave. We've been operating with vacation as productive time for probably 2 years at this point, at the election of the chief due to our staffing crisis. I don't think that we're going to see an alleviation of that staffing crisis in the near future, and we would like to make vacation productive for the entirety of this agreement for that reason. Another kind of just side issue that we've been facing with productive leave, not necessarily for purposes of collecting overtime, but with respect to city benefits like FMLA and paid parental leave. As everybody knows, we had a number of officers on paid administrative duty that were coming to work every single day. while in indictment for protest-related cases. During that time, their hours worked, 40 hours a week, just like the rest of us, were not considered productive for purposes of FMLA. If you do not qualify for FMLA, you do not get the paid parental leave benefit that the city offers. We still have officers being put on administrative duty while investigations are being conducted, while they are under criminal indictment, but they are being paid and they are showing up for work just like the rest of us, just in a different capacity. And their inability to receive FMLA and paid parental leave is having a significant impact on their lives. This is an issue that ABL leave, it's considered productive for calculating overtime for hours worked. I personally, the last time I was working on this contract, obviously was using a lot of ABL time. I had to have emergency abdominal surgery. I'll try not to blame that on this process because I did not have abdominal issues prior to this, but stress does funny things to our bodies. So I had emergency abdominal surgery and I did not qualify for FMLA because of my time spent doing this contract on ABL. So when it comes to productive leave, that's a priority for us.
Is that also 3B? I was gonna ask you, but it sounds like it is. Sorry.
Article 9, 3B?
Yeah, I mean, is that also ABL? Just for that particular section?
Oh.
It referenced Article 10, Section 6.
Sorry, I'm tracking now. That is not a reference to that. That is a reference to something else that we'll propose at a later time. It is addressed in the ABL article as well, but that's
Give
just,
me the mic for a second.
yeah.
So the issue that you are describing to us right now doesn't seem to be addressed here directly. Have you addressed it elsewhere in the contract? Are you bringing it to light so that we can come up with a mutual solution?
So it is addressed secondarily in the contract elsewhere. Just as we were talking about productive leave, kind of in this context, I thought it would be appropriate to kind of give you the
No, I
larger
appreciate
picture.
that. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure, because I don't think this covers it, so I wanted to make sure.
No, it is addressed very specifically.
Okay, so just beginning
in
of the
the articles.
conversation.
Correct.
I like that,
Yes,
thank you.
yes.
And the proposed changes you're talking about are in your ABL article or somewhere else?
One of the changes, the ABL portion is specifically addressed in the ABL article, and then in special leave, I believe, 8, is that Article 8?
Yeah.
Yeah, holiday, special leave, it's addressed specifically there as well.
Right. So, as I understand your proposal, we don't have one from you on 8. On 9, Section 1, Section 2, Section 3, didn't have changes.
Section 3 did.
Section 3, what did I
has
miss?
the internal cross-reference to Article 10, Section 8 that
Yes.
we just
Yes, okay.
erroneously did not remove since we weren't providing that article at that point.
And the PSUM, is that current practice? Right above that?
Yes, 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 that's
Very good.
the same language as the last
All right.
3, ever since PSUM integrated.
All right, and the preemption language is unchanged.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I'd like to have a caucus and talk about Article 8 and 9, and then come back, if that's satisfactory. Anything else you think we ought to hear from you before we take a brief caucus and talk about the interplay with those things?
No, go ahead.
All right.
actually, back in 10 minutes.
So thank y'all for that caucus interval. We have not, we've not given you proposals on these articles that have fiscal impacts and are part of the contract cost. And so I just wanted to make sure that I understood the framework of what we were going through. Productive time, of course, is going to be fairly expensive. And we're ready to go forward. We have treated the holidays, vacation, sick leave, I think, the same way. And apparently y'all have ABL that you're going to provide at a later date, right? I think that brings us to 12 is the next one.
So Article 12 is just a kind of a modern update to the type of technology that is used. We no longer have pagers, thank God. We would like the opportunity to use electronic billboards in the substations and in place of the billboards that are, or sorry, the bulletin boards that are currently there. Again, just a modern update to, communication technology.
All right, so we will take a look at this proposal and give you some substantive feedback later on. You'll see that ours is fairly inconsequential in the counter that we've given you.
I do have a question as to why you feel the chief does not need to retain the final decision-making authority over that.
Where are you at?
I'm in section 2, D,
Oh.
from, there had been, prior to this time in older contracts, a D, where the chief retained his final authority over this, even though we looked at all of these issues, it was the final authority of the chief, and that's been deleted.
Yeah, so we were just trying to kind of take out process that bogged down communication for the association, and, in the event that there's objectionable material, the chief will have final say on the, what's put up in city property. I don't have a huge issue with voting. It's more of just a process thing. Obviously, we have no intent of putting, any type of offensive or inappropriate messaging up on boards. We want to be able to change messaging pretty quickly through electronic billboards, and just any type of approval process. We just don't want to be bogged down with trying to
Okay, so
to
it's
message.
more of a, it takes time to get the chief's final authority sort of concept, but not his actual authority.
Correct.
Okay, I have one other question, and I think this is throughout the contract, and you had mentioned this earlier. You've changed here as well, the executive board to president. If that's how your bylaws are and that's what your association is looking for, we are not going to care. I just want to make sure
Right.
that that's a consistent, each time you do that, that's something that you're proposing because you're,
Yes, that's our intent. There's a chance I did not catch all of them in here. But yes, that is a process internal to us that is being changed for that purpose.
And we're not making any gotchas out of that, so don't worry.
yeah, no, I just, it's
Yeah.
throughout.
And it's the president, so, Michael Bullock.
So we're ready to hear from y'all about promotions. We already know from looking at that it's pretty close to some prior language that was developed at the committee level.
Yes, so our promotions committee, like you said, similar if not almost identical language. I made a good faith effort to put dates in here that made sense with the current commander or the materials that have been issued for the commander test that is upcoming. In no way are the dates that I've included meant to be any type of issue of negotiation. That is a process that I think Chief Greenwald and I could probably work together to make sure that we fall on the correct testing cycle. Okay. I will point out one change that we made previously. In the committee, we had 3 members of the association that had worked pretty intently on this promotions process
What section are you on?
She's right here.
for the leadership development program.
Gotcha.
Section 3C,
All right,
3A.
excellent, thanks.
So again, in committee discussion, because we had such a significant participation of 3 members of the association, we wanted to make sure that their voice remained part of the process as we implemented the leadership development program. One of those individuals is moving on to an exciting opportunity as the assistant chief of police at the University of Texas, and the other one is focused on other matters at this time. So thought it was reasonable to just reduce that to 1 so that we have an association representative, but the reason for 3 no longer exists, so.
Gotcha.
And I think that,
One more deal.
Oh, okay, so I probably should have mentioned this at the beginning. One of the things that I did, as we started to work on this draft is, identifying processes that we no longer use or, with the progress in technology no longer makes sense. One of those specifically is found, where was that? The appeal process after written examination. That first sentence talks about the raw scores by PID numbers only on a bulletin board located in the main lobby of City Hall. After speaking with the Civil Service Office, or the Civil Service Commission, that is not a process that they use. So in order to avoid any type of issues with promotions or, grievances of any kind for processes that we don't actually utilize anymore, I would like to take those out. And I just caught this.
Yeah, we'll look at that, and I'm gonna suggest to our team that we do the committee process again, because it looks like to me that this article is just making sure that it can and will work, and that it's real world, and it's the real calendar that we're dealing with today, where everything is.
So if I might, the only differences in the dates from ours to yours is from December 31st to January 1, so it's the same concept. And the other change was on the eligibility list. We use the term the next eligibility list, and you use 2025. I think we were fairly intentional about that, but we can absolutely look at it and comport the two to come up to a very easy agreement on that.
Okay.
Yeah, we are very close.
And then, in section 16 vacancies, number 7, we don't have an appointment process for commanders. So when it comes to vacancies for promotions, we only have appointments at the assistant chief level.
We'll look at that too.
Okay. So as far as Article 13 is concerned, we will re-engage with the committee for practical implementation and dates.
I believe so, and we'll give you further feedback on that today. I said, well, I thought it was on. I think that's a good idea. We'll chat about that. We'll confirm that later on. We may just bring you a cleaned up draft so we know what's left, but I'm a big fan of actually walking through this with all of the departments that are involved. You pointed out things that are not happening. HR processes change and so forth. We need a contract that actually is written for the world it's going to be applied in.
Well,
Yeah,
can I make
totally
one more
agree.
comment? I also want to say, I know that when we have the committee, we did a couple of really cool things within this particular article. One of them was to create the probationary period on the pilot level, which is unheard of in a contract. But secondarily, we took the portions of the Kroll report and actually had portions of those updated and delineated very specifically and looked at as to how weighting and at which point in time you added a particular score assisted with diversity. So I think we were all very proud of that and really happy to see this again from both sides in close to an earlier form.
And, much like last time, this remains a priority of the APA. We cannot emphasize enough the importance of quality leadership at this department, as we are facing a very young department as we recruit to refill our ranks. The quality of leadership is going to be imperative to the success of the department and the goal of meeting and exceeding the community expectations for this city.
And it couldn't be more true that the chief, the manager, the council members, the mayor share that. This really is a poster child on how to do promotions at the labor negotiations table. And everybody that had a role in it is entitled to be proud of it. I've had very little role in it, but I'm still proud of it.
So I think with that, we can move on to Article 14, hiring process. there was something brought to my attention by our recruiting department regarding the maximum age of applicants. The Texas legislature recently removed the maximum age, and again, in our best efforts to recruit high-quality individuals, I don't see why if somebody is 46 years old and meets the requirements to be a police officer in this city, that we should hold them out of that process due to an age limitation that even the state legislature now believes is unnecessary. So it is not in our draft, but we would like to strike the age requirement portion, if that's something you would be willing to discuss as a team.
Certainly we will. So there's people working here that are older than 46?
We're
A couple. I'm getting dangerously close.
Go to the 4 years, go to 4 years versus the 2 years.
Another substantive issue, or matter, it's not really an issue, a matter that is different in our drafts is going to be the pay and seniority. That's still an ongoing conversation on our side about, paying for seniority that was not actually gained at our department. Again, ongoing conversation. I think we understand the importance of opening our lateral process to potentially more applicants. So if you'll just allow us to continue to have that conversation. For now, we've put the seniority at 4-year pay scale.
I'm sorry, what
Section
section is
6. Hey,
that? Yeah. I had a couple
I'm
of
not seeing
questions
it.
if she's done.
Please.
Where she's talking about right now is here, we have 10. We're talking 4,
Okay.
open to discussing it, but it's,
Section 6, right?
Yeah.
I'm in the wrong place.
At page 30? Are you in theirs or ours?
Part C.
This is theirs.
You're in there, okay. Part C, page 30.
Gotcha.
That's 10 and ours.
All right.
And I do, are you done, or if you don't, aren't I have a question?
No, sir.
Okay, if you can go to section 3A. So there's some additional language that hasn't been in there before, where the association is giving input at the testing and screening level. Can you talk a little bit about why you feel that that's important, so that we can consider that?
Yeah, so, again, we always, we've been talking about the hiring crisis, and, it is extremely important to the association that we do not reduce our hiring standards in an effort to fill the ranks. I would rather work with less people than work with individuals that do not meet the standards at which we believe an Austin police officer should meet. So that's the conversation around that, is we want to protect the hiring process by ensuring that candidates are fit for the job and are fit and have the mindset to do the job in which they would be expected to at the Austin Police Department.
Okay, and I'm just a little curious. Typically, when we see you propose input from the association on such things, you typically recognize the management's right to actually do it. Here you've added language that says, and written agreement. which is just kind of, I'm not sure if that was your intent, and you really just wanted input and be part of the conversation, or if you actually, each time they set up a testing and screening process, believe that the association should have written agreement with the department.
Let me talk to the team about the actual intent before I give you an answer on that.
That's perfect. I have one more question in that same section. Is there any significance to the change from nothing in this provision, from nothing in this agreement? Is there any impetus behind that?
No.
Okay, I just wanted to check. And I will hand it back.
Give me just a minute to step out with Sarah, because I have a question about something else I want to ask her about before I bring it up.
That's all.
I know. I just need to explain.
At the very beginning, in part B.
Is this different? Different from what they said? Oh, is this new?
So you've seen our draft, draft on this article, just to give you our feedback on this as we look at trying to find one for this article that we can meet on, and it looks like we're pretty close, and most of this, other than the one we just talked about, is cleanup. And I think just really the evolution of the article and the environment that everybody's functioning in. Again, as clarification pretty much only on section 6, we've added some new language there to make sure that the probationary at-will status is not impaired by the new language. That's just to avoid ambiguity. Also wanted to make it clear to everyone that when we are doing background investigations, that we will be seeking and obtaining applicants' prior confidential 143.089G files per the amended language in the Texas Occupational Code, which we've referenced there. I think everybody that understands this procedure and the amendments understands how that works. And then we have competing proposals. I believe your section 6 has a 4-year limitation on experience for the lateral. We have proposed 10. It seemed to me when you were talking about hiring people over 46, that was actually more consistent with our 10 than it is with your 4. But in any event, we recognize that police officers coming in under the modified hiring process are not going to get paid at a pay rate in excess of their actual years of service. And it occurs to me we need to make sure we understand if that's combined, because I think it is. But let's make sure we know what it means, but the policy choice to be made here is the 2 versus 10, I think. Otherwise, I think we're on the same page on the other things that we've talked about. I will just mention.
I think we're at 4 right now,
Okay.
not 2, yeah.
Yes,
But
you're at
yes,
4, we've proposed 10.
Correct. An ongoing conversation on our side.
Very good. All right, I'll turn it back over to you for your Article 15.
Okay, so Article 15, drug testing. So just kind of as a overview of why this article looks the way it looks versus the way it has looked in the past. This is in line with what the city has agreed to with respect to fire and EMS. Obviously, it's not exactly the same as our job function requires us to have a firearm, which obviously comes with a great deal of responsibility, and there are allowances made for EMS in particular that would not be appropriate in our circumstance. So you won't see anything related to CBD or anything of that nature in our drug testing. That is still something that Austin police officers will not be able to engage in, regardless of whether they are on or off duty. So the other kind of fundamental change here is moving to a reasonable suspicion system versus random drug testing, again, mirroring the agreements made with our public safety partners, as well as transitioning to a saliva test versus taking blood and at times urine, depending on the circumstance. Obviously, saliva is much less intrusive, and it does account for the drugs and alcohol that the blood or urine panel would be looking for as well.
So we have a section 5 proposed modification to the pre-existing language. So we have an older article that's been frankly in this agreement for any number of bargaining cycles with a little bit of change from time to time. We understand the genesis of your proposals that extract from the other employee groups in the public safety sphere. We'll take a close look at those. Have you looked at the amendment there on the panel for prohibited substances? I think that's probably non-controversial that we proposed.
The 40.87?
Yes.
Okay.
So if you haven't taken a look at that, take a look at that. I don't think that's something that y'all will oppose, and we'll be looking at your proposed amendments.
Let me just check something here real fast. Okay, so we have our references to 40.85 for panel of prohibited substances. So let me take a look at 40.87. If I remember, because one of these, is 40.87 what was in the prior agreement?
I don't believe
Prior
so.
contract,
I
sorry,
think it's
the 2018. I think it was like, there's a reference to 8.5 and 8.7, is that right?
So there wasn't in the prior agreement in the 18.
Okay.
In the EMS and in the fire agreements, there was a 40.87.
Okay.
And the difference just being a
Terms.
minor disagreement in the attorneys as to how to apply it. Basically,
Okay.
the concept is, it's the definition of what is an illegal substance.
Okay.
And what's included in that.
So our inclusion of 8.5, I think, was based on my understanding of of where it was defined most conclusively versus 8.7 was.
Okay, so you just have it they have it in section 3,
Mhm.
so we need to just compare
Yeah.
section 3 to our edition of it at the end.
We reference 8.5, y'all reference 8.7.
Yeah. No,
I
know
believe
the
we have the
differences.
same intent.
Yeah.
We just need to make sure that whichever one we choose is the one that best reflects what we're actually looking for. Okay. So if there are no other questions about that, I know that's a departure from previous practice and something that will require conversation amongst your team. If you have any questions, obviously, we're happy to have a committee discuss, to try to come to a mutually agreeable conclusion on drug testing.
Very good. We will, we'll sort out the 2 CFR references, look at your proposed changes, and respond to you, probably at our next meeting. But generally, we understand and pretty much expected that we would see some proposed revisions based on the last 2 agreements that have just been made.
All right. Article 16, which is protected rights. Some of this, I don't need to read it all. I mean, you're gonna read it. I know you just got it yesterday. There's some similarities and there's some changes. We'll try to answer any questions. We both have definitions about anonymous complaints, complaint, and critical incident. There's some variations between those. We added some external complaint, internal complaint. We have some differences over the word, what an investigation includes. You have a much broader than what we believe is required. And there's a number of other things. I'll be glad to go through whatever you wish, but it's up to you.
Well, let me try to frame the discussion. We, as I said in my initial remarks about the framework for this negotiation, we're here to negotiate a contract that implements the ordinance that was initiated by the voters of the community and is supported by Mayor Watson and all the members of the council. As each of you obviously know, because you've been dealing with this for throughout the process, we can't take a contract to the council. They can't pass a contract unless it is certified by the city attorney as in compliance with Proposition A. And so, in reviewing the proposals that you put on the table, we are a little perplexed about why we don't see the path forward that you have articulated. Y'all have referred to it today. We understand that it's entirely possible that the explanation for that is that you wanted to see what we put on the table about how to do it first. You have that in hand. We actually think that is the subject of the day, and as soon as we possibly can, we want to see what your vision is for how we achieve that result, because we can't do anything unless we do. So we expected to see some of that game plan about how to achieve that compliance in your draft. Our competing draft in these 2 key articles, 16 and 17, lay out what we believe is a solution that is fully compliant with the provisions of Proposition A. We're not seeing anything in your draft that eliminates the G-file and makes that information public, that accomplishes the 365-day time period for disciplinary limitations and achieves the implementation of the definitions that are contained in Prop A. And so the items that you've just kind of gone over, I'm interested in hearing about whether or not these definitions here, in your view, are equal to and fully compliant with Proposition A, or whether or not they do something different and are not consistent, and if so, how we can achieve that result. I think that's our primary question, and again, the answer may be you're going to go back and look at what we proposed and see how close you can get to our proposal, but whatever you can tell me now about what the roadmap looks like would be helpful to us.
Well, first, it's not our objective to be in compliance with Prop A. Prop A passed, it's an ordinance. It does not override 143-303 of local government code. The city cannot be denied local control over wages, salaries, rates of pay, hours of work, other terms and conditions of employment, or other personnel issues on which the employer and the association recognize. So the law already gives the city the ability to do it. Now, if you want to try to comply with A, go ahead. We don't care. We're not here to bargain over A or to make our agreement fit A. Voters pass ordinances every day, camping ban, whole bunch of things, cities do it, don't do it, get sued. There's a lawsuit pending now over provisions of this. That's not our objective. We listen and we're trying to come up with a deal. But we're not required to preempt anything. And we have no intention of preempting 143-089G. The law says you may have one or you may not. Now, you may not, then you have to figure out what the state will allow you to do with those records of which there are no complainant, no justified discipline, nothing against the officer. Then that's your job. It's not our job. So we've given you language that identifies we're not opposed to our anonymous complaint. We understand how the system works. We have a state law that for over 40 years it sets out the statute of limitations. We haven't seen anybody that fell through the cracks. The chief has 6 months after they discover a violation for anything that's related to criminal activity. Those are working in 70 other cities. So if your intent is to put A in here verbatim, then we're not going to do that. We're going to bargain over every issue as it stands. The issue of what should be the statute of limitation, what should be the grievance, what should be open or not open. We're prepared to bargain over it. But we're not laying A over here and saying, well, we've got to meet this. We believe and still believe that only part you can put into effect in A anything of which the law allows you to do. You don't need us for that. So if you want to put it into effect, put it into effect. But you can't pass an ordinance that makes us preempt something we have no desire to preempt, and nor can we make you preempt anything of which you don't wish to preempt. So if that's your deal, that you got to have A in here, we're going to say, do with A whatever you wish.
So if the provisions of Proposition A, as interpreted by the legal department, don't allow the city council to approve a labor agreement, thanks, Larry. If the provisions of Proposition A, as interpreted by the legal department, do not allow the city to approve a labor agreement that doesn't make the 143-089G file public and available to the public, you're not willing to preempt that by contract.
We're not willing to preempt it in its entirety. We have, in previous contracts, preempted portions of 089G. Written reprimands are public. We are here to bargain issues. We are not here to provide a blanket preemption for all of the provisions of Prop A. So
I think that really is the point of whether or not we can make an agreement, because if we are legally prohibited from making an agreement that doesn't make the G file public, and legally prohibited from entering into an agreement that doesn't have a 365-day period for disciplinary action, how can we make an agreement?
well, I think there's the pivotal disagreement here about the concept of local control. It would be our position that the city attorney doesn't have to certify anything because the city has local control. An ordinance cannot take local control from the city government.
So you're still standing on the position that portions of Proposition A are not legally enforceable because of other statutory provisions, and have no intention of actually accomplishing its requirements by a contract that satisfies them.
Well, people pass ordinances all the time. It's not written by the government, it's not written by, it's citizens. Okay, they have a right to put whatever they want up, they have a right to pass it, we're not arguing with that. But this statute already gives the city that power. You cannot pass an ordinance. It'd be the same if there was a state law about water or whatever, and somebody said, well, I want all the water chlorinated, and they pass an ordinance, and the city says, well, I guess we gotta chlorinate, but the state says, that's totally up to you to decide. Well, this contract, if the city wants a contract, we're prepared to bargain over any issues. We haven't said we wouldn't, but we're saying is, we're not bound by A. In fact, large parts of A are seriously questionable, and some are in court now, and we'll see what happens. But there's nothing in A makes us preempt, no more than if we passed an ordinance and said the city will agree to X. You say, no, that's within our control. No, we said you gotta agree to it. We don't have to agree to that. We're just silent on it. There are other open records acts. You can look at what you do. You can leave the G-file pending the outcome of the lawsuit. I mean, if the court holds it's public, then it's public. If they hold it's not, then it's not. So, you want to talk about issues, we'll talk about them, individual issues. But we're not going to lay A out and say, we, on our end, have to agree to a bunch of things that we have questions about that fall within our ability to agree or disagree.
So I think the easiest question, and I think I've heard the answer, but I just want to make sure I'm not misunderstanding. What you're inviting us to do is to take the requirements of Proposition A, each of its definitions, and piecemeal try to get you to say yes or no to those. And the 365 element, try to get you to agree to that. But the bottom line is that you won't agree to preempt the 143.089G provision that applies only to civil service cities. Doesn't apply to other law enforcement agencies throughout the state of Texas that are under a different rule, that the voters in Austin have said, we want our agency to be under that rule. That's not something that you're willing to contract for.
At this time, we're not prepared to preempt it. The law is the law. You don't have to have a G-file. It says the chief may keep one. Well, don't keep one.
Sure.
But then you have to comply with a myriad of other statutes. Let's make it clear, I went and looked at what's exempted under the Texas Open Records Act. The exemptions, I copied them out, were 100 pages of type 12 type of exceptions to what's open to the public. Mayor and council's personal correspondence, not open to the public. And a whole list of, you're gonna hire a superintendent, you don't have to list that. Just page after page of which the government said, that material is not available to the public. It's not secret. People see it. But it's not available to the public. Page after page. And in 143, it says this file containing materials that are unsubstantiated, unfounded, of which no discipline was ever issued, which we believe falls within the false light, if we had a false light doctrine in Texas. And you have a ton of statutes in the open records. The reason the mayor and council's correspondence is not public, because it's invasion of their privacy and may place them in an unfavorable light. That's, in essence, someone could come in and accuse an officer. It happens in marital disputes, and then take it back, or I'm just trying to get child support, and that's all unfounded, never happened. But then you want to put that out there, but the law says we don't have to do that. That there's a place for certain files that are not open to the public. There's not the only statute that does that.
Just as a partial response to that, and let me thank you for your direct reply about making the G file a public file. A couple of quick comments. Many of the things that you refer to that are a part of the Texas Open Records Statute, Public Information Act, also apply to the personnel files of members of the Travis County Sheriff's Office. They apply in the city of El Paso, which is not a civil service city, it's a charter civil service city, just like it is in the city of Dallas. So police officers in those locations have many of the exemptions you just referred to, so that their personnel file is not a public record either as to the items that are there. Some of those cover those types of disputes that you're talking about, whether depending on whether or not they're in litigation and are public in a different context. The statutory privacy doctrine is a part of those, the family code provisions on confidentiality. Many of those same exceptions apply, and they are a part of the way those agencies deal with requests for officer files. We've got a PowerPoint, which is a part of the Texas, official required open meetings, open records training for all public officials that goes through and talks about what those particulars are. We think that is adequate and sufficient for Austin police officers to have their privacy rights respected. And so that's what we want. That's what Proposition A requires. The city attorney's not going to certify this contract unless it has it, and the council's not going to vote for it unless it has it. And so we believe that it is a reasonable solution for a labor agreement, and it doesn't make any sense to us. We are open and ready and hopeful that you will take a look at what we have proposed about how to do it, and to give us a counter proposal that tells us how close you can get to what we're asking for. Because the proposal that you put on the table completely ignores it as far as I can tell.
I understand your position.
Anything further before we break?
I think we should put ours on the table.
Okay. So I'm going to go through what we have exchanged with you, lay out what we want you to consider. And so starting with Article 16, we have, let me just page back to where I was. Protected rights of officers in Section 2, we have definitions that we have included here that are consistent with. They are either verbatim out of Proposition A or they are consistent with, and we're satisfied that they fully comply with that. You see the critical incident definitions here that are in compliance with the substantive criteria in Proposition A. We have the investigation definition, including collection and review of evidence related to a complaint or incident. We have the definition of serious misconduct, in custody death, use of force resulting in serious bodily injury, arrest or detention based on false criminal charges, falsification of police report or false testimony, official oppression, discriminatory acts. In Section 4, the key operative language that a letter, memorandum, or document relating to alleged misconduct by an officer may be kept within a file that is kept in accordance with Texas Local Government Code 143-089A. That's the civil service public file. That civil service public file is nevertheless subject to the exceptions in the Texas Public Information Act that you referred to a little while ago, and that specifically preempts the 143-089G provision. The logic of our contract proposal is that each of the items that the city believes that it cannot do without a contractual agreement are included in this, and our request that you accede to that and accept it to preempt those sections. The other items that the city has concluded through its legal department that we can do independently by ordinance are not proposed, for the most part, to be included in this labor agreement. So Section 4 is a critical part of that solution. The rest of some of the language that we've had in prior versions of the labor agreement is continued in this section with some cleanup and references to the right sections internally. The next article, which is 17. Yes, thank you very much. Section 10 has been added to language in some prior labor agreements going back for some period of time to make it clear that this article only preempts what it specifically says that it preempts. We've had that language in various other articles, and we have carried it forward here so that this leaves in effect all of the other provisions of Chapter 143, other federal, state, and local laws and ordinances, including ordinances, obviously, of the City of Austin. Article 17 lays out the language that's been in a number of prior labor agreements. I can't remember if our original, long time ago, when Dr. Watts here and I were negotiating a provision for minimum suspensions, it's 3 days now. I think at one time it was 5, but in any event, that language is carried forward. For those of you that have any knowledge about the City of Waco versus Kelly case, this has the language in here that allows the chief to make suspensions of more than 15 days, which would otherwise be the statutory criteria. We've agreed for years that those are good solutions so that the chief doesn't have to make a decision between 15 or firing somebody. The alternate discipline, the chief, is included here. We have the 365-day provision in here for the time period in which the chief has to take action instead of the 180 days. Prior agreement on the last chance agreement. Section 8 is the one that I just referred to with the 365-day time period with a specific preemption added to Section D. Section 9 is compliance language with Proposition A, which talks about issues of noncompliance can be raised only in a disciplinary appeal, and they're not grounds for a grievance or arbitration under the articles related to contractual provisions. That's because the city's conclusion is that Proposition A, disallowing grievances, does not intend to prohibit officers from exercising their disciplinary appeal rights. Process for demotions, there's a clarification there for non-disciplinary demotions, otherwise it's substantively the same. Substitution of demotion, mediation, effective contract expiration, which is something you talked about. I call those pipeline provisions. You've referred to them as mini evergreens. Civil Service Commissioner's authority is unchanged. And so that's our structure for Article 16 and Article 17. Sir, did you have any other comments? Did I cover everything?
I think you covered everything.
All right. So that's where we are on those articles. Turn it back over to you, see if you have further comments. And then I would suggest that we take a break and set a time to come back this afternoon and see what our roadmap shows from here forward.
All right,
Just tell us when, or text us when you're ready to come back.
Will do.
12, almost 12.
You have to do a lunch break.
Mandatory age.
It's so far behind, it's not even in there.
How's that Social Security working out?
So if I may, thank y'all for the lunch break, and I hope y'all are ready to go forward. I wanted to pick up the torch a little bit and try to clarify something, because I want to make sure that we're having a constructive discussion about what we're doing and why we're trying to do it. And I don't think that I made this clear earlier, and so we talked about this in the team. It's important to us. We have given you the proposal we have given you based on the legal analysis that the city can only accomplish the three primary pieces of Prop A that are in our proposal that I went over with you in articles, the new 16 and the new 17, with a contract with the APA that preempts those sections of the statute. We have not put Proposition A in the contract. We've not asked you to agree to Proposition A or its other terms and conditions. We have implemented all of the aspects of Proposition A that we believe the city has the legal authority to implement under that ordinance on its own terms, the city charter, and the other aspects of the authority of the city of Austin. But in order to change the status of the 143-089G file, we believe that we have to preempt that section and put that material in the A file, and that's exactly what our proposal says. And we're asking for you to agree to that. We're asking you to agree to the change from the 180-day provision to 365, which is in accordance with Proposition A, but again, it's one of the provisions of the statute that we believe requires preemption for us to accomplish it and therefore fulfill the terms of Prop A. The same thing is true with the portions of the definitions that have been added to our article, so that definitions that either would or might otherwise apply under the statute, that we have changed those things by agreement. We selectively ask you to do those things by preemption because those are the things that we don't believe the city of Austin can do unilaterally. We suspected that it would probably be dead on arrival for us to put Prop A in the contract and ask you to agree to it, and that's why we didn't do it that way. We have eliminated, as you know, in our proposal, the article on civilian oversight because it's no longer necessary. If we have the three things that we're asking you to agree to, we will be able to accomplish all of those original objectives, at least as well as, and frankly, in a more robust fashion than we've done in the past. And I recognize, and Jessica, you commented about this, that you have bargained incrementally in the past to achieve some of those things and to preempt portions of the statute. When the voters initiated the ordinance that is now in effect, they set a new course and a new direction. What we are hoping to hear from you today is that you are committed to trying to solve that problem. You're trying to help us resolve what we need by way of preemption in this contract, that those are not things that you are unwilling or unable to do, and that it's worthwhile for us to continue having discussions to see if we can in fact accomplish those preemptions in this cycle. There's a lot of other moving parts to the contract at large. We think they're important. We think they're important to your membership. Obviously, we haven't even gotten into the fiscal side, but we do need to have a commitment that you are willing to go forward and try to accomplish those things. And so we'd like you to clarify that before the end of the day so that we can figure out what our roadmap is. Any other comments, or I'll turn it over to you.
No, I think I want to make it clear, we came here to bargain in good faith, although 143 doesn't require good faith, only 174, but in the statute, we're here in good faith. We're prepared to bargain over any issue. You have every right to put on the table those things that you want to achieve. If you internally are linking it to A, at this point, that's just your business. It's not our business. And is the provisions of 143 negotiable and can be preempted? Yes. but they can be preempted by both sides if they volunteer. So there are proposals of which the city may or may not wish to preempt. I mean, we could make a proposal that the members just elect the chief of police. We could preempt 143 if the city would agree. You probably won't. Well, there are things of which you wish us to preempt. We may or may not do that. I don't know. I'm not giving you an absolute on anything. We are prepared to bargain. I think, and I'll reset it in the beginning, you can pass all the ordinances that you wish. There's thousands of ordinances passed all the time, written by lay people, some of which are enforceable, some of which are not, some of which are illegal, and some of which may be unconstitutional. So that in and of itself, the people who voted approved it, okay, but not all of that can be put into effect. And a large portion cannot be put in effect without the association agreeing to preempt it. So we're prepared to continue to bargain, and we've made clear that Prop A is Prop A, that 143, 300s, the power over wages, hours, other terms, conditions, and personnel matters falls solely on the city council by law. And you can't pass an ordinance counteracting the ability of the city to do its duty under the statute. Now, the city may choose not to do it, that's fine. But you can't have an ordinance that tells the employer, the state law gives that control, local control, 100% to the elected officials. So you'd be no different than passing an ordinance that stripped the council of things of which the state said, you, elected officials, you get to make this decision. You can't have a third party, even the public, counteract what's the state law. Because an ordinance, while enforceable, isn't enforceable against a state statute. Now, we'll accept that elected officials will do whatever they think is in the best interest of their constituents. We're okay. We'll let that get there. So I guess the answer is we're prepared to bargain over all of these things, and there may be paths of which we can reach an agreement. So that's where we are.
So what is your vision at this point, now that you know what our proposal is? What is your vision of a roadmap that allows us to get there in terms of order of proceeding? Is it appropriate for you to give us a counter proposal to what we have put on the table today and the structure that I outlined and then have clarified in this discussion? Because it is a seminal, fulcrum point for the labor negotiation process. And I just want to know how we can constructively go forward. It doesn't make sense for us to go forward through all of the various contracts and so forth, because if we can't get an answer, as I said earlier, the city attorney will not certify an agreement and the city council won't approve it. And so with that reality, I just want to know how we can do something that makes sense, that has a potential outcome that's good for everybody.
I'll restate, the city attorney is not required to certify a contract under 143-300. That's in the state law. Now, you have an ordinance over here, okay, fine, do as you wish. That's not required by the state law. Secondly, I don't have an answer for you. You just gave us, you're going to take everything in the G file and put it in the A file. Not looking at invasion of privacy, false light, things of which go, and even protections given by the state to city council members and the mayor have certain protections over things that place invasion of privacy. So all that needs a discussion. What's in the G file and what's in the G file that would create a false light that would be protected for other public employees like the mayor and council for their private correspondence. That's not open to the public. What they say in executive session. Well, if they're so big for transparency, come on out in the public and have your executive session where everybody can hear it. Well, they don't, because the state said this is where these things, some things aren't in the public. It's not like we're the only person that has a provision. So, you want to have a discussion about what to do with the material? We already told you, you don't have a G file. Then I'd like to hear from the city, where is it you think you can put that material in compliance with the law? Or is there a carve-out that protects people from false charges and things that invade their privacy or put them at risk or danger that should be protected from release, as we do other provisions in the law? So if you have that, then I'd like to hear it. But you just started off, you preempted, it's not our problem. Well, it's our problem, because there's things in there that are protected by law. And so what is your options? 180 days, 300 days? You've made no argument except somebody made up 365. 180's made up. It was put in the law 70 years ago. I changed it in the 80s myself, lobbying, to 180 days from discovery on criminal matters, because I felt that was right. Nobody should get a pass if they're charged with serious misconduct and hide it from the employer. We believe, from our side, from the union side, that they shouldn't be protected. We've agreed to that. That's been in the statute now almost 40 years. And nobody has put on the table to change it but here. Because nobody falls through the cracks. But you want to talk about what the statute of limitations should be, or what the statute of limitations should be on most serious offenses, then we'll listen. We had that conversation once before. We're open to hear that. But just a blanket, well, we want 365. Why? Because somebody made up 365 and stuck it on a petition? They just made it up. They could have put 10 years. So 180, 365, they're negotiable numbers because they're just a statute of limitation for a time of which the employer can bring a charge. And they're in two categories. Administrative violations, the employer has 6 months to charge it. If it rises, not be criminal, but rises to criminal related, which is pretty broad, the employer has 6 months after they find out about it. So you could, let's just say you abused a prisoner or you took money and the person wanders in 5 years later and reports it, they can still investigate you and charge you and fire you under the current state law. It's not like we miss 180, we've lost. No. Now, you didn't wear your hat and you failed to show up at roll call and it's administrative, yes, they got 6 months to charge you. They can't let those things. But anything of any serious nature, the law already covers that and it is applied regularly. So, you want to talk about what's in the G file? You want to talk about 365? And what was the third one?
The definitions.
Well, we'll have a conversation about the definitions, but people who want to, it's pretty broad now, okay? And we recognize that in the real world, we're not trying to prevent people who want to complain about the police from complaining about the police. You can call, if there was a payphone, you could call from a payphone and say, drop a nickel, dime, quarter, whatever it is on somebody. They're going to look into it. But if you're going to go forward and you know people and you know the names and you know the material, then you need to step up and identify that. And that's what we're asking. So you want to have a conversation about an anonymous complaint? We're open. You want to talk about who's a complainant? No, we're open. You want to talk about critical incidents? Well, we know what that is. We can define it, and we're open. So, but I'm not going to just say yes to what you gave me yesterday. I only read it last night.
I didn't expect to have a yes today. I did.
Pick up your mic.
Thanks. Appreciate y'all's help.
There's people waiting to hear.
Yes, indeed. I didn't expect you to have answers to all this today. I don't have the kind of tremulous dreams you probably do, so I didn't dream of that outcome, instantaneous success. But here's what I do think, and this is, by way of a respectful suggestion. I actually think that almost every one of the definitions that we are requesting, and I'll stop telling you where they came from,
Okay,
if that'll help.
it will.
But almost every one of the definitions that we are requesting are not even a real problem for you. I think you mostly agree with most of them. And they're not a lot different than what we've talked about in the past. We've resolved anonymous complaints predominantly in the past. who the complainant is and the way that works. I really don't think that the changes in the definitions we are proposing are very much of an ask. In order of hierarchy, I'm assuming that maybe the next one is the 365 time period. I also think that is not all that much of a change because the APA had historically been amenable to making changes. Took the state statute that you talked about that even though I certainly concede that it's part of the statute and it's theoretically a part of the real disciplinary process, in most departments it's actually not used. And in most departments it's a strict 180 days, but it hasn't been that way in Austin for a while. We've had contracts in the past that have worked out resolutions to that. I don't remember what year it was, but we worked out, a fairly progressive change with Chris Perkins when he was on the other side of the table from us. And clearly the hardest task is to take the G file and put it in the A file. And we also think that that should be feasible. We hope that you will take it seriously. We're in an environment to where that is pretty much what the city has to accomplish, and we are open to finding a path to accomplish those objectives. We were looking at Michael's statement about the objectives in the bargaining process going forward, and it clearly seems to me that that's something that he was willing to consider, and I think that that's probably true for the rest of your group and your members. So I don't have a problem with starting with the definitions and going forward. What concerns me is I keep hearing this undertone that you can just decide that Prop A is not valid and that the provisions in that ordinance, you don't have to get them in the contract and you can contract without them. And I just want to be honest with you because that can't happen.
Use the word can't, because members of the city's legal team has told the council last time that parts of that proposition were not legally enforceable in public at a public hearing. Now, I think you sign it, the council does what the law requires him to do, and if people out there disagree and they want to enforce parts of A, then let them sue the city and we'll get a definition. But the city's not bound by A. That's our position, and there's no litigation on that on point. So go forward, adopt it as you would anything else, and once you have a contract, then people say, well, you have to do, no, you don't. They're not bound by A. They're bound by 143-300 if they want a contract. If they don't, then do as you wish. You don't need us because we're not preempting things without a contract. So, and we couldn't.
Okay.
So,
Let's take
That's what I think.
visit with you just a couple of
Yeah.
minutes.
Let's take a 10-minute.
That'll be fine.
Thank you kindly. Any further wisdom before I proceed?
In general or about bargaining?
Thanks. So I did want to mention both of us referred to a number of these provisions in the Public Information Act definition. These are from sections 552.117, subparts in that section. Specifically, peace officer information that would be in the G file that's not public, irrespective of what we have proposed in this contract, would be home address, home phone number, emergency contact, social security number, date of birth, information about family members, Texas driver's license. There are some other sections in the law that keep other provisions, other documents, other public information from being available, including photographs of an officer. In addition to that, retirement contributions, W-2, W-4, I-9, direct deposit enrollment, all medical records, health insurance enrollment forms, driver's license, fingerprints, L2 and L3, and credit reports, all of those are statutorily exempt. And so it is not the city's intention in proposing what we have proposed for the civil service file contents to change in any way. And so your membership should certainly understand that. These are the same criteria that their colleagues in other agencies that I have referred to live with all the time. And frankly, in my experience in those other cities that I have represented in some capacity or the other, as have you, in El Paso and Dallas, are environments that are not oppressive and don't have problems for police officers for information that is available to the public. So we would like you to consider that in putting together a counter proposal. We would like you to consider what we've said about what we believe are appropriate definitions that we have put forward in our draft. I think that we crafted a satisfactory solution. I believe that one of the issues you might have been alluding to about public meetings and statements by city legal about the validity or invalidity or unenforceability of Proposition A has to do with the provision in there for a grievance. We have made it clear that grievances are not permitted, which we think is necessary to fulfill the provisions in the ordinance, but preserve disciplinary appeals, which are not within the appropriate and proper scope of it under the 143 provision. We've asked for no preemption in that context. And so I think that's the best way I can define optimally both what we are asking for and why we asked for it the way we asked for it, because we think it's a fair ask. And I think what we are prepared to do is to come back after we receive a counter proposal from y'all on those topics, and to make sure that we're prepared to have discussions and find out how close we can get to a commitment that allows us to achieve those objectives. And I will just add to that, that that's not an ultimatum. We want to have another meeting, and we want to see what you are able to propose.
I think you got the cart before the horse. These are things you want. Now, I'll look at them. I'm willing to have a discussion, but I'm not here to figure them out for you. I mean, if you think there's ways that 552, the Open Records Act, protects data that would be in the G file, then we're willing to look at that. But I'm not here to figure out how you do it. I'll be glad to talk to you about it. We're glad to discuss it, but I'm not here trying to help you figure out how to get in compliance with A. It's not our problem. So I'm willing to talk about the definitions. I'm willing to talk about what happens with data if you don't have a G file. And I'm willing to talk, and I'm not clear on your grievance language, because you put a bunch of stuff in there and we didn't get to it. Are you trying to carve out that we cannot grieve enforcement of the contract? I'm not sure. I didn't get into what all those changes you put in your grievance language. Perhaps you should explain what your objective there is.
I'm gonna read it. Any complaints related to, thank you, flashcard. Any complaints, section 9, appeal rights. Language that was previously in prior versions of this contract, I think going back quite a long time, about hearing examiners and so forth, precedes this, and the new language is, and it's right before section 10 on the hearing examiner provisions. Any complaints related to alleged breaches or non-compliance with this article may be raised only in the context of a disciplinary appeal. Allegations that a provision of this article has been violated shall not be grounds for a grievance or arbitration brought under those articles relating to the enforcement of the contractual provisions of this agreement. I think that is not only an appropriate solution, I think it's the only solution, because the disciplinary rights of officers are to be preserved. Irrespective of what you may or may not care about what Prop A's contents are, in my experience, these articles have never been the subject of a grievance outside the framework of disciplinary appeals, because they're about disciplinary appeals. And so, I guess you could have a law school question about whether or not this disallowance of a grievance under the grievance articles means that you could or could not enforce this contract at the courthouse, which I kind of think it probably still can be, because the Texas and federal constitutions have a non-impairment of contract provision and preserve the right to enforceability for private contracts, and this falls within it. So I think that the result of our proposal is you can't file a grievance arbitration under these articles, the ones we're talking about here. This article is 17. You can still do exactly what the disciplinary appeal provisions that we've had here working effectively for decades. The rest of the article, the rest of the contract is still subject to the grievance arbitration provisions, as they always have been. And if somebody felt like the contract, presumably the APA, since it's the APA's contract, felt like there was a contract breach in Article 17, then they could file a lawsuit and get enforcement in that framework.
So-
That's my best summary.
There's a little more to it. I gotta let Becky.
And I will say this, this is in new Article 17 that Lowell's talking
Right.
about. There's a Section 8 in new Article 16, which is old Article 17, that basically says the same thing. So this is not a foreign or brand new concept. In fact, we were just trying to preserve what was already essentially outlined in new 17 into our new 16 into our new 17. So essentially, if you feel, or if the officer feels that any of those due process protections weren't followed either via the CBA or 143, it can be brought up in the disciplinary appeal, and then the arbitrator or the hearing examiner or the Civil Service Commission can give it whatever weight that it needs to be given. But otherwise, everything else in the contract is subject to the
So,
Article 19 grievance.
The city the city violating Article 17,
There's no recourse except to limit it to the hearing examiner for that particular discipline. But the city not following the contract in 17, are you arguing that that's not grievable? The enforcement, application, interpretation of this agreement?
What we're
Carving out?
What we're actually not really carving out anything. We're being consistent with what was already in current or last Article 17 relating to disciplinary appeals. And so since we also have the same subject matter in 18, it's just being consistent. Now, if you want to tinker with the wording, it's not anything new. It's not a foreign concept to this contract.
If you left it as we had in a previous contract, tell me why you need this language.
Because it's only in one article, and we've put that same language in this next article, which also deals with police officer rights and discipline.
And the further answer to your question, because the elephant is here, standing right here in the room, we will not get an opinion from the city attorney. I heard what you said, you don't care.
I don't.
That the contract fully complies and fulfills Proposition A, and without that, the city council won't pass it. And so that's why I'm trying to do something here that's not an exercise in futility, and it doesn't injure any substantive right of the union or any member.
I'll take a look at it, but I have no intent of signing a contract we can't enforce. And nobody in their right mind would do that, any contract, for anything, that they couldn't enforce the contract. So I'll look at it, but if your intent is that you can just do whatever you wish and we can't grieve it, then we'll have to take a look at that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we will be adjourned for the day, and you can feel free to send us communications about the logistics for our next session.